Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're probably taking some time out of what is no doubt a busy, kind of hectic, both work and family schedule, is my guess. And so we really appreciate you kind of taking the time to be here today and spend some time with us to learn a little bit more about our company, specifically about our program, Say What, and how we are handling that in the midst of what is all going on within our country and our world right now. My name is Ben Murray. I am our Director of Contracts and Client Relations at Catharsis Productions. What that means is essentially I kind of scope out the work that we agree to do and then make sure we have all the resources in places to actually do it and then make sure it gets done is the kind of toddler explanation level of, of that job. So I'm happy to be here with you today. I've probably talked to some of y'all individually. But again, thank you for being here. And before we get started, I want to say a few things. First is that this is just a really tough time for a lot of people, and so there's a lot going on in our world. Obviously, we've had we got an election coming up. We got a lot of really important Supreme Court decisions. We have a national global pandemic. And then we also have a resurgence of Black Lives Matter, which is taking some time to help us understand the plights of certain groups of people and the reality of their voices still not being heard in the way that they deserve to be. And so we are in a really kind of difficult spot, and it seems kind of chaotic, right? And I think I just want to kind of acknowledge that and acknowledge that kind of chaos, but also talk about the fact that I think there's a little bit of a through line to that. And I think the through line to that chaos is really that we have a renewed interest in taking care of people. Sometimes that's forced on us, like with a pandemic, where we're talking about taking care of somebody physically, medically, financially, things like that. But also, it brings about a renewed interest in taking care of other people, where we're talking about making sure that those who are hurt, the hurters, or the folks who are abusing, are held accountable, right? If we're looking at various, the law enforcement profession and things like that, when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, also with Supreme Court decisions, we're talking about people's rights, being acknowledged for maybe the first time, or at least reformalized. And it's really important to understand that that through line is that we all care about taking care of other people. Um, and I think that's why y'all are here today, because I think right now it'd be very easy for you in your position to just like check out, right? Like you just flip the table on college orientation and just be like, there's no way we can do this. We're just assigning a book and they're going to write a book report and that's going to be their orientation program. Deal with it. Like that would be a very easy thing to do. But the fact that y'all are here, the fact that you are listening to this, the fact that you are going, what can I do for my students? What can I do for these young people who are coming or not coming to my campus? At this incredibly important time in their life? What kind of information do they need, and how can I make sure that I can get that to them in as effective as a way as possible, considering the circumstances? And that's why y'all are here. And I really just want to say thank you for that, because not only does it make our job easier when you care, but it makes for a better community and a better culture and a better experience for everyone when y'all are putting so much into your work. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking what may be your summer right now and working on that. So thank you for that. So let's move on, right? So where are we now? We are in the middle of a global pandemic, right? With COVID-19, and that is changing the way that all of us interact. That is changing the way that all of us function. That is changing the way that we work within our professional lives and our personal lives and all that kind of entertaining stuff. The world is bananas right now. And a lot of y'all at your schools probably don't know what you're going to do yet. Some of you do, some of you don't. Some of you may have an administration who's been super proactive. Some of you may have an administration who hasn't made up their mind yet or can't figure out or still waiting on information. Some of y'all may be starting early. Some of y'all are starting at the same time, but people are, international students aren't coming in yet. There's all kinds of stuff involved in that. And you may not even know your budget, right? If you don't know your enrollment, how do you know your budget? So a lot of stuff in regards to that is still unknown. And there are certainly even limits on what you do know, right? In terms of like physical spacing. So if you have people coming onto campus, but where can you put them? How far apart do you need to keep them? Things like that. There's just a lot of details there that are really difficult, especially at a time like orientation when part of the draw is a bunch of students are coming together and meeting each other for the first time and all hanging out together in very closed spaces. That's part of the fun of it. And that's unfortunately also part of the difficulty of it this year. And so we are learning to have a new appreciation for some online alternatives, whether that's for classes or for meetings or for potentially programs like this. We at Catharsis have had a new appreciation for that too. For a company who makes our living going around the country doing live in-person trainings for large groups of people, this has kind of changed our mindset and the way we think about things and the way we do things. And so we have, for the sake of everyone involved, decided that all of our programming this fall is going to be done virtually. So any contracts that we had that were all set up with an assumption of an in-person program, we are going to be doing those virtually if they still work for the client. And if they can't work for the client, then we're going to have to decline that work. So at this point, we are doing everything virtually. And that's mainly because we can't predict or guarantee anything. You know, we have educators who would be going from airport to rental car to hotel to new school and then do it all again the next day. And we can't guarantee their safety. We can't guarantee the safety of the people they interact with. So it's probably best for everyone, although it's certainly not plan A, if we go virtual and we keep everybody safer. And so now the deal is to make the most of this because it's important we still do it. Not only is it important for your planning purposes, but it's important because these issues aren't going anywhere. I mean, if anything, these last couple months have taught us, it's that people matter more than ever. And we as a country are still really confused sometimes about what it means to care about other people in the way that they need to be cared about and want to be cared about. And so we have to keep working on that. And so if you're familiar with our company and if you're familiar with our programs, there's some stuff that you're going to recognize, right? These things are going to still be really engaging and interactive. We work very hard to make sure that our educators are top-notch both in their content knowledge, but also their delivery. So they are very fun, they're very interesting, they're very smart, they're very engaging, they're very interactive, they're really accessible. So people relate to them, people like them, people feel like they can learn from them. Also, the work that we do is research supported. That doesn't mean that we spout a bunch of research, but what that means is that we look at the latest research to make sure that the methods we choose to use are going to be proven effective. We want to make sure that what we are doing, we know works. And we're going to be focused on moral reasoning. It's very important to us that we get at the heart of the human condition in terms of doing things that are right because they're morally right and ethically right, not because they're legal or not legal. Like obviously we're talking about a lot of things that are illegal, but we want to make sure that people understand this stuff is wrong because it's immoral, right? It's not wrong because it's illegal. And so we're always going to care about checking that box, and we're always going to not only checking the box, but making sure that we're changing the culture, right? We'll hit the definitions, we'll hit the things we have to hit, but really we're more about cultural change and that message than we are about making sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's. Some things that will change that will look a little bit different. First of all, is just our method of delivery. Today we're using a program called GoToWebinar. That's our software of choice. No software is perfect, but the reason we like this one is because not only from a user interface, it works really well, but also because we can have anonymous questions. We found that with difficult issues, students really respond well to being able to ask something anonymously to where only our presenters see the question. And then we can either answer them privately, or we can, if it's a great question that maybe everybody would want to know the answer to, we can say it out loud and answer it that way. So that really helps for us. We're also going to make some adjustments to the programs. Part of that is just the timing and things like that, but a lot of it too is we're just going to acknowledge the reality of our current life. So we obviously, if you seen our programs last year, none of them mentioned social distancing. This year they will. This year we'll talk maybe a little bit more about online harassment. We'll talk a little bit more about virtual stuff because that's just the reality of the world that we're living in. So we're trying to make those adjustments as we go. We also use support staff. So previously, this program, Say What, was just done by one presenter. But now we will at least have one presenter and a support staff member working the kind of behind the scenes. So they can answer logistical questions, but they can also help in terms of summarizing comments that they're seeing, helping kind of be a foil to the presenter as well, and just really provide some support there because it's really important that we're making that available to people so that the presenter can do their job, but we can also kind of address as many of the students' concerns as possible. Obviously, the audience setting might be a little bit different as well. Some of y'all, if you engage with our services, are going to have students who are all over the world still, all over the country still, in different places. They may be on campus, but maybe they're in their individual dorm rooms or apartments or something like that. Maybe they're all together in one room, but they're super spread out, and they're still all on their phones, or they're watching it on a screen, or they're in small orientation groups, but they're all over the campus. So the way that those audiences are set up is going to be different, and we're happy to talk with you individually about how that's going to be set up and what we think might be the best way to work with that, depending on where everybody's going to be sitting, structured, and what kind of devices and accessibility they have and things like that. And then finally, our capacity. We have historically had an audience cap of around 400 people. We have found that that's the sweet spot in terms of making sure that we can address individual concerns and validate audience members without it being so many people that it's too chaotic or that's not possible. In all honesty, like with these online programs, it would be better if the audiences were smaller than 400. However, we also understand that we signed contracts and y'all made plans assuming a certain number of students, and there's not enough time, there's not enough space, and there's not enough resources to spread those out appropriately. And so we're going to honor that 400 number. But if you find yourself in a position to where you have lower enrollment, or you have a little more flexibility with your schedule, and you can have multiple shows with less people, we kind of recommend staying more at that 200 or 250 mark if you can. And if for some reason you have that flexibility, then we are trying to really make it cost effective for you to add that second program. So for a lot of circumstances, what we've done is we had an originally contracted rate with someone or an institution, and that assumed some travel, but obviously we don't need to travel anymore, and so we can take that travel money and put it to a second program if you want. But that's something, you'll see my contact info here at the end of this presentation, and so absolutely give me an email or something like that, or a call if you want to talk specifically about that. So we'll be happy to engage with everybody individually, because this year more than ever is going to require a little more individual attention as we do these kinds of contracts and things like that. But I want to talk to you specifically about the program you're here to say. We've done demos of these for each of our programs. This is our program, Say What. This is a program that is about, like many of our other programs, making sure we're understanding people's experiences and treating them with respect. This one is specifically around various identities, right? So this is about enabling students to understand their own biases and their own privileges, because we all have them. Everybody's got biases, everybody's got privileges, depending on what kind they're in and how that works. And so we all have our own stuff we bring to the table. And so helping people understand what that is, whether it's regarding race or sexual orientation or physical ability or any number of things, it's something we want to talk about, and we want to help people understand each other's experiences. So we make sure and explain what microaggressions are, why people commit them, how we can prevent them. We also identify what bias statements are and how to respond to them, because that's really important. It would be a bad idea to teach people about all these things that are a problem and not give them any tools to help them solve those issues. And so we want to talk about tools as well. And essentially at the end of this program, we're empowering everybody to see, to increase their kind of positive communication and cross-cultural understanding, so that we're all making this world a better place and promoting wellness and continuing education and a healthier culture, because that's the goal for everybody. So I think there might be some more interest in this program considering recent events, and that's great, because anytime that a spotlight is put on something, that's a great thing. That's a great problem to have, right? In terms of being able to talk about those things with real life examples. And you'll see today, we maybe talk about some real life current event examples so that we can have that conversation. And we don't want to shy away from that, because that kind of silence just adds to complicity, and that's not something we want to do. So we're going to have two of our presenters here come on, two of our great presenters, Anthony and Ann. You may have seen them before. They're our senior educators. They're going to come on and do a little snippet of this program for you. It's not the full one, obviously, but the idea of this is just to give you a taste of what it looks like. I think for a lot of folks who've seen our programs in person before, it's difficult to kind of imagine, hey, what does that look like virtually? So we want to help you just understand a little bit of what that looks like and what that can feel like, even though it's not the whole thing. As we're participating, there's just some logistical stuff to go over. If you're not familiar with this software platform, you can use that orange arrow to expand or minimize the control panel so you can kind of move it around as you see fit and kind of click it in and click it out. If you're on your phone or a tablet, you can kind of swipe back and forth to see what's going on with the PowerPoint, what's going on with people's faces. We're going to ask you as you participate that you use the questions box. The raising hand feature doesn't work super well. I mean, it shows up, but it's hard for us to see with all the people attending. It's hard for us to see who's got their hand raised. And so we ask that you use that question box. So not the hands, not the chat, but use the question box to answer questions, ask questions, all kind of stuff with that. Everything submitted in that box is anonymous. The only people who see it are myself and Anthony and Ann, and you'll see them pop up here in a minute. And then you can also use that bar in the middle to kind of make the video faces of people bigger or smaller and the PowerPoint bigger or smaller, depending on how beautiful you find these people or how easy it is for you to read, various font sizes. But that is all I have for you. I'm going to come back at the end of this and answer any kind of logistical, contractual questions you have. But for now, I want you to say hello to Anthony and Ann, enjoy what they have to say. You're going to like them. I like them. And then I'll see you here again in a few minutes. So thank you very much, y'all.
I'm so glad to know that Ben likes us, Ann. I feel so much better.
I know, I feel relieved. Phew.
I was always wondering.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, I'm Anthony DiNicola. I am a senior educator along with my colleague here.
I'm Ann. I'm the other senior educator. Both Anthony and I have been with Catharsis for almost a decade at this point, right, Anthony?
Don't say it. We look too young and beautiful to say those things. Yes, no, and what's incredible is Ann and I have been working with this incredible company and doing a lot of work in the field of interpersonal violence prevention. The lion's share of the work that Catharsis has done up until this point, over 20 years, is talking about bias, especially when it comes to sexual violence. A dear friend and colleague of ours, Sherry-Ann Culberson, wrote this program along with a lot of input from fellow educators here on tackling specifically microaggressions and bias, because basically fighting sexual violence was like, oh my gosh, we've got this. Let's just talk about implicit bias, y'all. That seems a lot easier. Thanks, Sherry-Ann. Thanks a lot. No, but seriously, this is what Ben was saying. This time in our country, especially as a Black man who identifies as queer, it is a really powerful time. It is also an incredibly grief and rage and excitement and fear are all things that I know I can speak for Ann only because we've had a lot of in-depth conversations. But I know that your students and you yourselves are feeling all of these things. And so we are so deeply grateful for the opportunity to engage in these types of conversations. And do you want to say anything before we get to know these people on the line?
Just that we love having these difficult conversations and being able to talk to students of all identities about how we all can get on the same page about confronting bias and confronting privilege. For me as a white woman, is just really being able to lead these conversations. We've already seen it to be so rewarding, and we're really excited to show you what we can do with your students.
Absolutely. So I want to get to know these folks on the line a little bit better. So I'm going to ask y'all some questions, and I would love some bold honesty. Who here has ever had someone hurt their feelings, just in general? Tell us in the questions box.
Yep. We got a lot of yeses, a lot of me's. Absolutely.
I love this person. Me, exclamation point. My feelings, they've been busted up. All right. So I love this, some bold, open honesty. So tell me, who here has ever been made to feel excluded from a group?
Someone immediately goes, who hasn't? Absolutely. All y'all are saying, yes, me. We've all had that experience.
Yes.
All right, and one final question. How did that feel when you were excluded or you had your feelings hurt? How did that make you feel?
Yeah, I felt less like a human. Someone felt super shitty. I love that one because it's too real. Isolated. This one is powerful. Sad and undervalued. Embarrassed and sad. And then someone just being open and honest. Depends on the situation. Sometimes it feels relieving, because sometimes, let's be real, there are some groups that you may realize, I don't want to be a part of this. That if it means this to be a member of that group, I want to feel on the outside of that. And I think that that is a powerful feeling as well. What we're at the end of the day talking about, and someone even pointed out, everyone has probably felt some level of feeling undervalued or left out or excluded, isolated. When we're talking about specifically what we're going to talk about in this program, microaggressions, we're talking about these feelings of isolation, these acts of being excluded, isolated, made fun of, all of these things based solely on a part of your identity, something that we can't change. And so, yeah, I want us to dig a little bit more into this term. We've used it a few times, microaggressions, right?
So can any of y'all in the questions box try and give us a definition of what you think a microaggression is?
We'll give you a second.
Big
It's
question.
a little long. It's a little longer than me. Ooh, I love verbal side eye. I see that one. Okay. An act that seems small, love that, but when they all add up, your identity is devalued. I want to come back to that one. That is freaking brilliant. I love this. I hear that a lot, and I think of it personally when someone asked me recently, what is this microaggressions program? And I was like, it's debunking or explaining or unpacking the idea of death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Totally.
As this person said, it might seem small, but let's be real, even just looking at a paper cut, you know that that thing's bothering you all day. And imagine when it adds up and all of those things based on a part of your identity, this thing that you can't identify.
So in fact, microaggressions, as Anthony is saying, are not so small. They're, the definition that we like to use with your students is they're social exchanges in which a person says or does something. They can be intentional, they can be unintentional, but the end result, like this person on the line said, is that your identity is devalued. It belittles and alienates a member of a marginalized group. What are some examples of marginalized groups in our current US society?
Someone said POC, people of color, women, boom, love that. I don't love that women are devalued, sorry. I just love that, but let's be real. Sometimes people forget that, like, the term that people might have used years ago is minorities, but let's be real. Women outnumber men, especially on college campuses, and they are more often marginalized. Queer people, non-Christians, people who are undocumented. Absolutely, and someone's pointing out, what if that group is dangerous? What if that the marginalization can be very dangerous? That's exactly what we're talking about. Yes, that depending on where you exist in the world, that your identity, your religious identity may be marginalized. Native individuals, indigenous folks, absolutely.
And so in the full program, we not only talk about this idea of who marginalized groups are, what this idea of marginalization is, but we also talk about the idea of people having dominant identities as well, and the complexity that occurs when, in reality, like 99% of people have some mixture of dominant identities and marginalized identities, as well as really dig into how these identities then create ideas around stereotypes and privileges that we break down.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, and I love that Ben brings up that word, the P word, privilege, and I want everybody to know we don't start the program talking about privilege. We ease into that because I know that's the point when, especially, depending on where we're from, that's when people's booty holes get tight. We're nervous. We're like, oh, what is that? Are you going to come after me? And it's no. We're getting to understand that we all have a series of what I call P's and M's. Privileges and ways that we might be marginalized in our society. And those things do not equate to goodness or badness. They are just truths that we have to just understand so that we can understand how and why these microaggressions happen in our culture and continue to happen over and over and over again. So I think, Anne, you have a poll question that you want to throw out there, right?
Yes, I do. All right, y'all. So now that we know what a microaggression is, How many of you all on the line think you can spot a microaggression? So we're going to have you select one of the following. I can, I think so, nope, or, well, I assume that's what comes next. Anthony, I like that we give them the opportunity to sass us in this poll.
Oh man, why are we doing this to ourselves?
All right, so I'm going to give y'all 3, 2, 1, and close that poll. All right, and here are our results. Awesome. So most of you all are like, I think I got this, with a little tiny bit of sass and a little bit of I definitely do this and a little bit of oof, I don't know. So I think the only thing we can do now is really just put it to the test, right, Anthony?
We have to, Anne. We have to. So spotting a microaggression, how do these comments typically start? How do you know someone's about to say something that is a microaggression?
Yeah, let us know in the questions box. No offense, but not to be racist, but
That's a lot of, there's a lot of butts up in there, Anne. There's a lot. You know what happens when people put that many butts up in the middle of a sentence.
yeah, something asinine is about to happen.
Absolutely. And someone's playing devil's advocate. I don't think the devil needs a lawyer. The devil don't need no lawyer. Okay. What's embedded in these? You said racism, something offensive. What else? What other ideas tend to be included?
Ooh, someone's bringing up the idea that a lot of times they sound like, oh, you're so blank for your race or your gender. So attacking someone's identity, dealing with stereotypes within people's identities, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And I also want to point out, just to get meta for a second, some folks in the comments are talking about this idea of cancel culture and all of these things happening. And this is exactly what we would be talking about in this program. Some people are bringing up some incredible comments about how some students might bring up based on their identity. Well, I feel like in this moment right now, my white identity is making me feel, and we have to unpack and we have to get to a place of understanding that there are groups in our country that are systemically marginalized. And someone brings up this idea of stereotypes. When we talk about these ideas of racism, when we talk about these ideas of gendered stereotypes, it tends to be that those stereotypes benefit some groups and they denigrate other groups. And the groups that tend to be denigrated are exactly as y'all pointed out earlier, the groups who are marginalized in our country. There are not as many jokes, yes, that there may be jokes about, ooh, white men be like, but it's really not putting down white men that much. We still have plenty of images, and we still have plenty of understanding of the power that a lot more white men have, versus jokes that talk about Black people being lazy and Black people being this, or women being this, or blondes being this. They tend to hold those groups back from moving forward and possessing any sense of power. I want to come back to this spotting a microaggression though. Sorry, that was me getting meta and talking about how we would if we had more time, but we only have a couple minutes with you. How do people tend to look when they're about to make a microaggression? Or you can also tell us, what do people look like after they've heard a microaggression?
Ooh. Shocked. Yeah, I think a lot of us have the shock face, but then maybe also the fix your face of like, ooh, I'm super uncomfortable, but I don't know if I want everyone to know how uncomfortable I am. Disdainful, absolutely uncomfortable. Ooh, someone's bringing up the idea of like, sometimes you have to have the did I just hear that? Like the what do I do moment of like, I'm inputting that this is messed up. What's the output I want to give out?
And that's literally what this program is in that definition of microaggression, we talked about unintentional. We know from diversity research that far more often these things are unintentional. Because let's be real, we all feel, and you've brought it up, shocked, uncomfortable, embarrassed, all of these things. But tell me in the questions box, is there just one person who's flying around the country just microaggressing on everybody's campuses?
I mean, they'd have a lot of frequent flyer miles, but no. Y'all are pointing out the questions box. That's not how it works. What actually happens is we've all done this. We've all suffered from foot and mouth disease and said the wrong thing. And that's why this is such an important thing to talk about on college campuses, because we're all going to mess up at some point in our lives. It's about what we do when someone points out that we really stepped in it.
Absolutely. And so what, we have to understand is I want to play a little game, and I, on the fly, let's just do one.
Great.
Just one example. So what we would do is what Ben was talking about, these bias statements. Let's look at some examples. We would pop up a bunch of them and play this game. It works very simply. These are all real things that Ann and I have heard in our lives. And we just simply ask y'all, the audience, a simple question. Is it cool or not cool? So let's play it with this last one. I agree it was wrong, but there's a right way and a wrong way to protest. Cool.
What do you all think? Cool, not cool? And also, does context matter in when and how a person is saying this?
A lot of not cools, a lot of people, one person being like, I'm very interested in how to handle this. Just like, how do we tackle this one? And I love that someone says context certainly matters, but not cool. Yes, that is an example of a but statement. That is not a microaggression. That is saying that this one, depending on the context, this is a very different conversation. So let me ask y'all on the line, why are you saying it's not cool? What is not cool about a statement like this?
It's typically veiled racism. Yeah, absolutely. That someone else is pointing out the importance of maybe like defining the terms, that someone might really want to understand the meaning. What do you mean the right way? What do you mean the wrong way? And I love this final point. It silences before hearing the other perspective. Absolutely. Because if someone's immediately labeling something as a right or wrong, they're not really letting any of the layers of the complications of protesting in this current moment when we're talking about a fight for racial justice, and how for some people it's really important that people have the right to protest. Right, Anthony?
And that's honestly, I mean, because someone pointed out, it says that some people are, it's like, it's okay. Someone made a great point in there that was a little longer than I want to read, but it was that it's valuing things over lives.
Yeah.
And really, the reason we added this is it's very timely. And Anne, do you mind speaking to this one personally a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to, because someone actually just said in the questions box, it's a dominant group trying to tell a marginalized group that their attempts for voice is still wrong and not accepted. And I think that's a great way to go about talking about this. I've had this conversation with family members. I was sitting down with a couple members of my family. We were all white, and this idea came up. I know, Anthony's shocked to learn my identity. This idea of we support the movement, we support racial justice, but again, that but statement, why did they have to be so violent? Why do they have to loot? This idea of they over and over. And the question that I asked in that moment was like, hold up, who's they? Because if we're talking about, as a group of white people, how Black and brown people are using their voices in this moment, isn't it really our job? Like, we all have different jobs in this fight for racial justice. For white people, we got our own stuff we got to figure out. We got our own work. We shouldn't be trying to figure out what the work is for someone with an identity that we can't really understand their lived experience.
And someone just made a brilliant point that I responded to very briefly, and I want to first say, and I wish we had more time for me to talk about how your level of allyship in that moment was incredible. And at the same time, someone pointed out, I've heard people from marginalized groups making similar comments as well. What we're saying is there ain't no one identity who gets to say, I can't microaggress. There's a difference between, and why we would break down the understanding of racism when we're talking about systemic things versus bias statements. But what we're trying to get at is people can microaggress. People of color can microaggress. Women can microaggress. That it is not just left for people who are purely dominant. It's not just cisgender white straight men who get to hurt everybody else. No, that people can do this depending on their identity. And someone also brilliantly pointed out that it's about the intentionality. that what we're trying to, at the end of the day, get at is there is a big difference between intention and impact sometimes. We all, I can guarantee everybody on this call, we all have that family member who we've been around the dinner table with, maybe around the holidays, and they say something and you like, ooh, you lucky I love you, because I'm not liking you too much right now. That we know that sometimes even people who we may share so many great traits with, we may have a lot of respect for, their intention sometimes doesn't meet their impact. And so what we're trying to is get to a place where we can help make more intentional statements. That's why we have to look at those contexts. We have to look at these things and examine, all right, how do I make my statements better? How do I do better? Because we know from research, we know that psychologically, we know our brains can do better. When we know better, we do better. But it's getting us to a place where our brain wants to be lazy. It wants to use, as people pointed out, stereotypes and generalizations to help us. Our brains are very lazy, but those stereotypes, those generalizations get in the way from us actually learning more and exposing ourselves to a greater breadth. We can't just go to one person and have them explain the entirety of their identity to us, because they only represent one person who may have that identity. We have to be willing to make some change.
Yes. And so we talk about the steps towards making change. We like to use this acronym WOKE, created by the brilliant Sherian who wrote this program, that in order to change, you got to be willing to work on it. And part of that is being open to change. You're not going to do any work until you realize, oh, dang, I've been called out. I've stepped in it. I got to change my actions so I can change my impact. I think kindness is really key to this understanding, because we want to be kind to ourselves, because we're going to be putting in some hard work. We're fighting against our brain in that way, in those ways that Anthony was just talking about. And also kindness to our community, who we may have harmed or who is being really generous with us to call us out on some crap. And then finally, education, education, education. We put it on there 3 times, because it's a process. This stuff is not like a quick one and done thing. Unfortunately, Anthony and I can't solve racism with like an hour-long educational program. We wish we could, but we just really want students to understand it's about committing yourself to this process of learning so that you can make sure you're having the impact that you want on your community.
Because here's the thing, I'm always honest and open. We are all going to make mistakes. Tell me, folks on the line, what do you tend to do when you trip someone by mistake? What is a normal reaction?
Apologize, absolutely.
Yes, help them up. Say, I'm sorry, absolutely. Help them. Yeah, I love that. One jerk is like, laugh. No, I'm just kidding, you're not a jerk. They felt really weird, yeah. Like, or they fell on a banana peel, you know, it's like, it's funny.
We get it.
We've been there. So yes, you check in, you acknowledge first. But let's be real, what more often happens when someone it's pointed out that the joke they made was actually kind of sexist or racist? What do they tend to do?
Defensive, yep. They defend it, they deflect, they say, I'm not racist, they get angry, maybe they give you that uncomfortable silence, or maybe they even freeze up because they don't know what to do in that moment.
And someone earlier made, I think it was like a little tongue-in-cheek joke about job security. What we're trying to get at is actually, it is. Because what we're doing is we are, and when I say we, I mean y'all on the line, you are our conspirers in this. We are trying to help your students to make sure that they have job security. Because we have to understand, if we aren't willing to own up to these things, yeah, on your college campus, you may microaggress and a student may call you out. And that student might get defensive and keep doing that. They might double down on it if they're not actually willing to take these steps to listen, to apologize, and to do what I call the badass move, thank them. Why do you think that that's the badass move? To thank that person for alerting them to the fact that they have said something offensive.
Ooh, it affirms their value. Oh, I love this. Education is a gift. Absolutely. We say thank you to gifts. Let's also say thank you to the gift of education.
It's an expensive gift, but it is a great gift nonetheless, because it is, that person is absolutely spot on. It is a gift. It is an acknowledgement. Oh my gosh, I have offended you. I am hearing you. I apologize. I now am going to make that change because I don't ever want to do that to anybody else. Because at the very least, that somebody else might be a boss. That might be someone who can fire me or give me a raise. And I don't want to definitely offend that person. So that is a level of dang job security in the future that you are assuring yourself in the now in doing this change and making things better on your communities. So I very briefly want to go over this last example, play this game with y'all. And it's basically a call in or call out. And do you want to explain in the briefest sense possible this idea of call in, call out?
Yeah, so this actually goes back to what y'all were talking about earlier with cancel culture. We want to avoid having to cancel the people we love. So when someone says something messed up, there's two options. Maybe you're going to call them in because you're going to give them that gift of education and talk them through why what they did was wrong and how they can do better next time. Or maybe it's egregious, maybe it's extreme, maybe it's actively putting someone in danger. And in that situation, we got to call that crap out so that we make sure that we are protecting anyone who has a marginalized identity in a room with us.
Boom. That's exactly
ourselves.
Yes. And so we would go through that and talk about examples, how to do either. What we know from research that tends to work using humor, using groups and getting all of those things involved. So let's do this one. Let's say someone in class says, "That's so ghetto," in response to a statement another classmate makes. The cat disappears because the cat's just like, "That's a problem." So let's ask you a few questions.
All right. I love already someone's like, "Here, let me give you strategies." So first of all, is this a microaggression?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, a lot of exclamation points.
Yeah. So what groups are being, what marginalized groups are being harmed by a statement like this?
Yes, brilliant. People are already pointing out Black and brown folks, people of color. Wow, someone's also taking it all the way back to Warsaw, Poland and talking about it's a denigration of the original sense of the term ghetto.
Yeah, absolutely. So what might make the statement, oh, sorry, what's that, Anthony?
I was also saying they also are brilliant because they pointed out the idea of it's socioeconomics. It is this idea of urban versus suburban, that city, what that means. It's all coded language, absolutely.
Yeah, so what might make this difficult to challenge?
The fact that it's set up, that it may seem public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're friends with that person, if it's a person of color saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that moment, what do you all think? Is it a call in? Is it a call out? And if you don't mind saying how you might do it, because I think this could be a both option.
Absolutely. Someone said call in, and I'm going to scroll back up because someone earlier said they gave a really great way to call in. Hey, excuse me, can you tell me more about what you mean by that? What do you mean by ghetto? Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sorry, speak to it, Anne. Yeah.
Just that y'all are pointing out again the gift of education, that sometimes just a well-placed question and a long pause afterwards where we're making them reckon with what they actually said can be really powerful for that person to do a lot of learning, and can also really show everyone else in that room that you have everyone's back, that you're not going to tolerate language being used that could harm folks in that room with you.
At the end of the day, I want to, in a minute, call Ben back, but I want to say thank you so much to everybody who's on this call for giving us 15, 20 minutes to engage in this conversation, even for a little bit. I know that for me, not just because of my identity, but because of the worlds that I've existed in, the spaces that I have not felt comfortable in my life, it is so gratifying to know that there are individuals who are committed to bringing this conversation to their college campus in some way, shape, or form. As Ben joked earlier, a book report ain't gonna do it. And it's because there are incredible books. I wish every student got a copy of White Fragility and how to be anti-racist and tackling, you know, I never called it rape and all of these things that tackle isms and transphobia. But the power of hearing their peers see that diversity isn't just a capital D word, but it actually means valuing them. It is the most gratifying thing that I know I've ever gotten to do in my life, is to help promote that idea that diversity is complicated and hard, and it means just putting more seats at the table. And it means that hearing more voices makes us all smarter, all more profitable, and all better students of whatever community we're a part of. So I want to say thank you so much for engaging even in this little short period of time with my dear friend Anne and myself. And we're going to stay on and invite Ben to join us, and let's talk a little bit more. If you all have any more questions, please throw them in the questions box for Ben or Anne and myself.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you all so much. That was fantastic and enjoyable as always. So hopefully you guys watching got a good experience and understand kind of what this looks like in terms of a virtual program, how we still engage people with polls and with chat box functions and being able to reference what they're saying. Some of you, I was able to respond to some of your questions while we were going kind of quickly, so you got a sense as to what that looks like to have a behind the scenes person as well. So we appreciate that. Somebody's asking how long the full program is. If you can give us 90 minutes, we love that, but we'll take what we can get, basically. So we have our material will last about 90 minutes, give or take. We do, with the online programs, try and take that back a little bit to around more like 75, because at some point people's butt alarms go off. If you only have an hour, we can do this in an hour. We don't like to go less than an hour because we feel like that really starts to sacrifice our learning objectives in terms of what we can accomplish during that period of time. So somewhere between an hour and a half, depending on your schedule.
So this person's asking about the idea of the nature of moral reasoning and where it ultimately comes from. So absolutely, yeah, we sort of gave you such a condensed version of understanding these things, but yeah, we have to get to a place in the full 75-minute program of fleshing out. There is literally parts of our brain, and the idea of building empathy and the idea of why stereotypes seem beneficial to our brain. So we have to understand this idea of how do ethics even take place? How do we become ethical beings? So yes, all of these ideas of moral reasoning are stretched out and explained over the course of a program in bite-sized chunks, so that students aren't going, what is this? Are we talking about Proust? What are, like, we're not getting into some deep philosophical leveling, but we are absolutely going to allow students to walk away understanding that there is a reason why our brain doesn't always want to be as ethical as our heart might want, but that we can aspire to that and what it takes to. My side eye is on point. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent side eye.
So
excellent
side eye. All right. Anything else we can help you all with? Just a lot. They're just complimenting you all so much, so I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. And we did see, as we did the program, some of y'all had a few questions about content in terms of how do we handle maybe comments from students who might have family members who are members of police or who are members of groups on campus that might sort of feel that they are marginalized groups, but in fact have a lot of dominant identities. And that's what's great about if we're able to have 90 minutes is that we are watching this chat box carefully so that if students bring up questions like that, we can discuss that. And then we always also check in with you all at the school to say, hey, are there any big issues that are going on that we should know about? Because if stuff like that is going on in your school, which, let's be real, most campuses are having this national reckoning and these conversations, we want to figure out how to best serve your specific students and what examples we use and things like that.
Absolutely, we can always tailor those games, those things that you saw. Everything, and we do add at least one larger scenario at the end. All of those things can be tailored, or we can pull from our stock of examples that we have.
Awesome. From a logistics perspective, if y'all need to know, we're able, using the software we have, to download the attendees. So not only the registrants, but the folks who actually attended. And we can export an Excel sheet for that. So that's actually one benefit of the virtual program, is nobody has to stand in the room and count all the heads and make sure people are paying attention. The software also uses an algorithm to create an interest score, so how much people were engaged and how much they were paying attention. And so it actually makes it even difficult for them to kind of come in and just fall asleep. Not that they would, because they're going to be delighted, But that's really useful for us internally, and so some people find that externally really useful too. I got a few folks asking about pricing, so feel free to email me about that. I hate to say pricing out loud simply because it really depends. So it depends on timing, it depends on how many presentations we need, it depends on when we need them. So there's a couple factors there that are just difficult to say this is the blanket price. So feel free to email me at ben@catharsisproductions about that. We can kind of talk specifically about your situation.
And if you mention my side eye, maybe Ben will even give you a better price. I don't know.
Get a free sticker.
Someone's also asking about how students access this. So what we do on our end is we're able to generate a link that we send to you as the, I guess, liaison with the college. And then what that allows them to do is it allows them to register, and it'll have them download a quick desktop app, and then they'll be able to participate. And they're able to do this both from a computer, but also from a phone or a tablet. We just had a bunch of students do it from their phone, and it was really fun because they were sending us a bunch of emojis about how they thought people reacted when they heard a microaggression. It was great. But yeah, it is, it's pretty user friendly and simple for them, and we give you everything you need. It's actually pretty low, what's the word I'm looking for? Low investment on your end. We sort of hand everything over to you, and then your students just click a link and boom, there we are.
And we actually, in terms of downloading onto a desktop, we're looking at a way to not even have to download, if you're using a computer, to just be able to, you click it and it opens up a web browser that we're figuring out as well. So
yeah, and somebody's asking if this can be done by either the individual or the orientation group. The answer is both. The software is made best for individual interaction. So if everybody has their own device, that's fantastic. So what some schools have done is just have everybody in their own place on their own device, as long as it's all at the same time, good to go. What other schools have done, because their orientation groups are meeting in small groups and they really want to stick with that, is put them all in a room together. Maybe that's one giant room where they're spread out, or maybe that's a bunch of individual classrooms, and then potentially project something on the screen. So like they'll project people's faces in the PowerPoint on the screen, but they can be on their phones, in the chat function individually, and we just have the big, we just have their phones muted or whatever. So there's a couple different ways to kind of lay that out, depending on how you're running your orientation and how those folks are set up. But yeah, we can talk you through that as well.
That seemed to work. We did a school earlier this week that did it that way, and it was really fun.
Mm-hmm. In terms of our registration cap, I'm seeing that question. We cap it at 400. That's kind of what we've had as our limit historically. That is, we would prefer it be less than that, honestly. The less people there are, the better interaction there is, but we also just know that the reality of college, university scheduling for anything doesn't allow most schools to have like lovely groups of 50 people. That's just not a reality. So we cap it at 400. We recommend lower than that if you can do it. Then we can talk with you about how many presentations that would need to be. And then somebody else is asking about this session. So yeah, this specific session, we're going to post on our website. So our other programs, if you go to the landing page, their specific pages on our website, you'll see that the demos of them have been put on the website. This one will be on in a couple, maybe after the holiday, so it may not be up there until Monday. But just know that we're going to put this on so you can reference it and send it to other people if you want to as well. Someone's also asking about multiple days. We are not opposed to doing multiple days. That's fine. We do that both with back when we did in-person trainings, we would do that. But certainly with virtual, sometimes that works better for a college's schedule, is just breaking that up. So we're fine with multiple days on those multiple presentations. Sometimes we do them back to back. Sometimes we do them once a week, depending on how the orientation schedule flows. All right, awesome. So I think that's enough. If you all have any other additional questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email at that below. But otherwise, again, we really appreciate your time here. We appreciate what you're trying to do for your students and the ways that you are supporting them. and the ways that you are willing to go with us on this journey as we all try and figure out what our bizarre backup plan looks like through this time. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. Have a great holiday weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.